Welcome to the Well-Rounded Retirement Podcast with John and Jim from CRIS Financial. In this podcast, we help you take a well-rounded approach to retirement planning so you can retire with complete certainty. If you're looking for proven and straightforward retirement advice, ranging from how to protect your assets to how to spend with confidence, this show is for you.
Hello and welcome to Well-Rounded Retirement with Jim Donewald and John Glowacz from CRIS Financial. Jim, how are you?
I'm good, Eric. How are you doing today?
I'm excited to be back with you. It's been too long.
Me too. COVID's horrible. All this craziness, all this quiet time. Don't like it.
Seriously, I just sit here and wait for our discussions. But it's not you and I discussing anything today. You have a special guest on the show, Steve Goldstein, one of the founders of Thomas Gold Solutions. Why'd you bring Steve on the show today?
Yeah, I'm glad he could make some time for us today. They have some software that's called Retirement Analyzer, which is just fabulous. And actually, I've just started to use it. I've been using it for about a year now, but I've really gotten into it. And so it's nice to have Steve join us today. So Steve, I just wanted to have you come on. And for those who don't know your background, can you just give us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Jim, and thanks for having me. Basically, I right out of college, I've been into numbers all the time, finance and numbers. I was actually an option trader for about 22 years right out of school, and then I moved into the financial industry and basically was a financial advisor. I have my CFP and ChFC designations, and then we saw this software program that we're going to talk a little bit about today, and I fell in love with it. I'll tell you, with its clarity, what it provides, how easy it is to use. And so I had an opportunity to get involved with this, and then we purchased the company, my partner Brooke Thomas and I, about 11 years ago. And what we specialize in now is really just simplifying the retirement, analysis process, the financial planning process. So that's what we do. So I'm kind of happy I moved into that area. I still service my book, even though it's not as big as it used to be. But yeah, we can actually help a lot more people by providing this software program.
Well, I tell you, and I appreciate that because I'm a numbers guy too, but all the software that I've used in the past is so arduous and so whatever that I've just resisted. And it wasn't until, we use other plans as well, but it wasn't until I came across this, and the ease of use and what it allows us to do is really quite fabulous. So who do you help out there?
It really can help anybody, and it doesn't really matter, what age you are. I mean, the earlier you start, the easier financial planning is. If you're older, around 70 or so, your options aren't as big as if you're 35 or 36. But basically what we do is we actually take the process, which really isn't that hard to understand. But when you start throwing the jargon in that all these financial advisors use, you could really forget things, or you might not understand things. And then you kind of shut down because it doesn't make sense. So what we do is we kind of take this financial planning process and simplify it using the software.
Well, anybody who's listened to my podcast knows that every time I preach, it's the plan, it's the process, it's not the product. Why do you think a financial plan is so important? I've got my own opinion, but Steve, as another point in the industry, what's so important about a financial plan?
Well, I got to tell you, you go through life, right? What happens, right? You're born, right? You grow up, you get a job, right? You make as much money as you can, and you try to put as much away as you can. So when you stop, right, it's going to be adequate. Okay, and if you're not paying attention to what the rest of your financial life looks like, how do you know when you can stop? How do you know what you'll look like if you want to stop working at 62 or 65 or something like that? So having this plan in place and working along with a financial advisor who can, as things change, show you the effect on your plan, that's really where you have to be. You got to pay attention to what it looks like, the end game we call it.
Well, and that's what I tell my clients. I said, if you don't have a plan, regardless of me, how do you know if you're there? How do you know if you're there? If you want to retire at a certain age or whatever, how do you know if you've met those goals that you've set for yourself? If you've got no goals and no plan, I think that's why a lot of people are so discontent in retirement because, I got clients that just can't stop working. I get a hold of them and I talk to them. I say, my biggest concern is why don't you guys spend some more money? You're doing just fine. They just can't relax. Do you find that as well?
Yeah, it happens. It happens. But I got to tell you one thing, though. The people that are most relaxed that I come in contact with are the advisors that use this software program and their clients because, they're basically there's some clarity around it. Okay. And the people that it's almost like paying attention to what you spend every month. Okay, if you're living paycheck to paycheck and you're not paying attention to everything you buy, and you don't have to pay attention to every penny, don't get me wrong, but if you have an idea of what you can spend every month and what should go in a certain spot for later and things like that, I got to tell you, your stress level drops, and you really can take a breath and say, hey, look, I'm going to be okay.
Well, one of the reasons I got back into this software, because I'd used it, but not as religiously as I'm using it now. But I'd used it in the past, and then I used to kind of avoid the taxes because I didn't really want to get into that. I'm not a CPA, but it's become so important, and I find out that Roth conversions, my whole practice has changed because of where we believe tax rates are going in the future. And I do agree this software makes it so easy to illustrate, does it make sense? Does it not make sense? You plug it in. It's here again. You can find that. So one of the things I want you to expound upon a little bit, which I thought was great that you gave us, is in the process, the planning process, everyone goes through a budget, and there's like a clump number they can give you. Hey, I'm spending $8,000, a month, and then there's what we need to do, which is really break that out. Can you explain to everyone why that is so important, that even though it's the same $8,000, whether it's going to the mortgage or the car or vacations, why it's so important to separate that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it really is that important. And let me tell you something about the budget. And a lot of times people get upset when you use the word budget because they want to run from it, right? Everybody wants to run from the budget. Nobody wants to talk about it. And I know this sounds weird, but maybe it's because you're misbehaving financially. Maybe you're spending too much, right? So what if we called it a monthly expense plan? And Jim and I both know that that's really the cornerstone of all financial planning, that little area right there. So if we don't know how much you're spending each month and how much money is leaving your accounts, then how can we financially plan for you? So you really have to spend the time. And talking about Jim's clump number, if you just tell us, hey, look, I need $8,000 a month, and then we're going to pop an inflation rate in there of about 3%, because our job here is to help you live the same kind of life that you live today, if you're happy with that, your lifestyle, on into retirement. So we have to increase that 8,000. But that 8,000, the problem with that 8,000 is it's made up of a bunch of components, and those components don't always act. They don't act the same all the way through the rest of your life. Some stop. Your mortgage doesn't inflate. So I think the best financial exercise you can ever do, in my opinion, is to actually take the time and then work on your monthly expense plan and create it. And that really helps. It makes a world of difference in the end.
Well, what I learned from you is I won't even do it. If they refuse to do this, we're done, because I can't get anywhere, because like you said, unless there's just so much extra money flying around, which isn't most people's case, you need to know what's going on. Otherwise, as I always tell everybody, my advice and my numbers are as only good as my input. If garbage in, garbage out, great numbers in, great results. And to me, this is key, because I used to be one of those guys that just kind of took the lump number. And as you've taught me, that there's so much that goes into that, and it's so important, especially when things aren't going right. I mean, we talked about this, and depending on when you start planning, whether you're late in life, early in life, got a divorce, COVID, all this stuff comes in. My financial plans change more times than I can think about it. You got to see how that stuff, really reacts in your retirement. So, when somebody comes to you and say, well, do I have enough money to retire? How do you respond to that?
Well, and let's talk about that. And Jim just mentioned moving parts. There's so many things that can change, right? You have taxation, right? Now, tax law changes every year, right? So basically what we're going to do is we're going to take the information that we know today, and we're going to use that. We might increase or change things a little bit to protect you, but that's just one component, right? How much you spend is another component. The rate of return you make on your investments is another component. If you can actually work till age 65, because that's when you want to work until, but your health might not get you there. What if you have to retire at 62? So the retirement age is a wild card, right? There's all kinds of things, long-term care costs that may happen or may not. So you have all these moving parts, and what we try to do with this program is give you a look at how you look today with what's in place and what's going on, our current policy, you want to call it that. But then what we do is we meet with you every year to update and kind of steer the ship a little bit. Okay, the numbers we use today probably aren't going to be any good 40 years from now. Why? Because we don't have a crystal ball. Okay, but if we continue to make tweaks every year to try to keep you on track, that normally works, and we can give you a good idea on how you're going to look. At least, today you might look okay, right? If things start to happen and things change, we might have to make some adjustments along the way.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great point. And one of the things, like I said, that I first shunned from and now embrace wholeheartedly is, your software has tax components, provisional income, all this comes into play, and I'm even in my practice, this stuff just becomes more and more important, especially as tax rates increase. So tell us about a couple of the options you have. I know, like I said, I mentioned the provisional income, but how it might analyze maybe converting some of this money to Roth. Tell us a little bit how, if I was plugging this in and trying to solve for a client, how you might explain that.
And it really comes down to, everybody, well, what's the big deal here, right? There used to be pensions a long time ago, and they did away with pensions, and they came out with the 401k. And so everybody's funding their 401k, and there's a lot of proud people out there that are so happy they're funding their 401k to the fullest. I'm making a max contribution. What they don't realize is this, though. At some point, you have to pay taxes on that. Okay, so you could be funding it, and it could be worth a couple of $1 million. What you don't realize is you have a lot of tax risk there. I'm not saying that you're going to lose, but I'm saying that there's a lot of tax risk. What do I mean by that? When you decide that you want that money, or you're age 72, right? You're either going to be forced to take it, or you can take it. But whatever the prevailing tax brackets are, tax rates, at that point, is what you'll pay to get that money out of there. So a strategy today, because we know what the tax rates are this year, okay, and then after, when we start next year, we'll know what 2022 looks like. When you know what they look like, you actually know what it'll cost you to. We say buy your partner out, the government. Okay, the government is your partner in these qualified plans, and whatever they say the tax rate is when you need the money is what you'll pay. Okay, so that's the uncertainty there. So the question is this: do we pay them now when we know what they are, or do we take a shot in the future at what they might be? And see, so we can start to alleviate your tax risk by paying some of it now, and then not paying as much later, which is really up in the air. Try to alleviate the uncertainty. Yep.
Well, I love the way you say that, because it's buy your partner out. I mean, I think about that as kind of how I explain it to my clients. It's here we've gone into business, and I've lent you money or whatever it is. We're in business, and okay, how much do I owe you, Steve? And you'll say, Jim, I'll tell you later. Don't worry about it. And that makes me a little nervous. So when we sit down with clients, we always tell them you only have two plans. You have your plan, or you have the government plan. So if you don't plan, you default to the government plan. And like you said, we are, at least in our firm, are a firm belief that tax rates are going to go up here sooner versus than later. With the money we were just spending, the COVID relief, you name it, $28 trillion last time I looked at the debt clock, and increasing rapidly. Somebody just told me today, I think they're looking at another $1 trillion stimulus package of some sort. Where's the government going to get this money from? I have a feeling from us. That's my guess. But anyhow, one of the other things I wanted to say that was very helpful that I have found too is, our clientele is typically a little bit older, mostly retired or very near in retirement. And a lot of people, the long-term care option, let's call it, we like to call it a wellness benefit, but a lot of people really think that's a good idea with rightfully so, because the percentage of people, going to need help is, I think it's in the 70 percentile, but nobody wants to pay for it. And, I think with the budget and the software, the way it's built, it helps me as an advisor bring up some of these maybe uncomfortable conversations. So tell us a little bit. I know you've built in a couple of tabs, one for the long-term care and one for life insurance. And kind of, you can, I know this is a great visual, the software, but kind of explain to them what it kind of takes into account for the client if somebody was to pass away or become sick.
Yeah, and basically it's really kind of simple. What we do is we actually gather your information, and we run a plan, and we call it Utopia. So let's say, if you're running a joint analysis, you both live to age 100 and nothing bad happens. What I mean by bad is like premature death or a facility care stay or maybe negative market movement. So what we'll do is we'll run a plan to show you how strong you are if nothing bad happens and you both live to age 100. Now, you have the longevity there, but we don't have any of these events that cut things short or cost more. Once we get that number, okay, what we'll do is we'll actually stress test the whole deal. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll take this utopia and we'll show you what utopia looks like. I know this might sound like a contradiction here, though. So you take utopia, right? And basically what happens is this, though, right? You're looking at utopia with premature death. Okay, how does the surviving spouse look, right? A good situation, but all of a sudden now we subtract that. We show premature death, right? So that's number one. Number two, you take utopia and show what happens if we add long-term care costs in. Okay, so again, the situation where you're both living age 100, but then we add the long-term care cost. How does that affect the plan? And then lastly, right, we take utopia and we basically show adverse market movement. And that's really the three components of the stress test there. Okay, and if you know, basically we have a tab 6 retirement tab that actually shows you, again, all the way up to age 100. If it can hold up against those three, you got yourself a plan. And that's how we kind of set it up. And we're always looking at this. Okay, and we'll do an update every year to show you if things have changed. Now, what do we have as movement? Let me just tell you, let's just run through them real quick, right? In long-term care, you got costs that are increasing pretty steadily at 3+%. So we can show the difference in cost. We might not show you going into a facility until age 80. You might be 60. Okay, so we're going to show you what the costs are in your state 20 years from now. We can show you market movement, basically up and down 30% in the market if you want. So you see how we stress test that good number that we have, right? If both of you make it to age 100, and then we start to try to take it apart, and we want that good number to hold up, and that's a stress test for you.
Yeah, because I know everyone right now, at least that we're talking to, and we do assets under management. Everyone's gung ho on the market, and I love the market, but you gotta keep an eye on it too. That's one of those things. It's not going to go up forever. One of the things you mentioned too, correct me if I'm wrong, but does your software, so like I have a premature death and now I'm a single person, doesn't that recalculate the taxes on that as well?
Oh, it does. It actually turns you into a single person, and you can do that too. So basically, if we show the first death, anything that the deceased spouse was bringing to the relationship financially stops. Okay, but basically the higher the two Social Securities get transferred to the surviving spouse. But again, anything that was supposed to be done financially by the deceased spouse actually stops, and we show you what a single analysis looks like, moving forward from there.
And I know that's a killer in a lot of plans when we put them together, because like I say, I always start with the utopia and we kind of hedge into some of these other areas of long-term care and life insurance and whatever. But I found with that software, it's just certainly easier to have that conversation. One of the things I want to back you up for a second, during the budget, which we've had here, which, like you said, when I get that clump number, so to speak, that's, we need 8,000. I used to ask people, what's it cost you to be you a month? It cost me $8,000. And then you get into the fine tuning here, whatever it is, it's $1,500 every month on vacations, or, you go, oh my God, especially if they're not making it. I'm not talking about everything's all rosy. I'm talking about they're struggling. And, I don't want to be the one that tells them, hey, you can't spend money because they're going to look for another advisor. But when you kind of slide their numbers in front of them, and maybe show them, I know your software takes into account, hey, the national average for this expense is, 10% or whatever it is, and they're spending 30%, even they got to take a look at their own actions. And then, what are you going to do about it? I mean, it's not my problem. This is your problem. I have solutions, but, do you see this as a problem? If not, we'll just, keep moving on. So I do like that. I see it's taking that kind of awkward conversation and how do you want to address this, or do you not?
Yeah, and I got to tell you, from all the research that we've read and gone through, when people actually feel like they're financially organized, they feel a heck of a lot better about themselves. And what I mean by financially organized is look, you have an idea of what you're making. Well, you know what you're making, but you have an idea of what you should be spending. Okay, and then once you get this monthly expense plan down, again, the best financial exercise you can ever do, in my opinion, and you just start keeping an eye on it, I can almost guarantee that it's going to behave better. In other words, you're not just spending on a whim. You're watching yourself a little bit. Nobody said stop spending or cut your expense plan by $3,000 a month. We're not talking about that. We're talking about knowing, and basically when you have a standard of living and we try to plan for you and we try to help you live your standard of living throughout the rest of your life, we need to know what your standard of living costs you today. And that's really your monthly expense plan. So it's a great exercise. And yeah, you'll get some positive out of it, because I can almost bet you that you'll save more.
Well, I think, like I said, I have found, at least when I'm running through this, there's a pretty big disconnect with a lot of people. I mean, they know it, but they don't really know it, or it hasn't really been, they're not looking at it. I'm in the Texas area here, so I've got a lot of engineers. No, they're the opposite. They come in with their spreadsheets and their budget, and they love this program because it's exactly the way they're thinking anyhow. We're just maybe putting it in a more simplified plan for them, which just makes it very easy to relate to them. So look, here's the numbers you've told us. Here's how we're looking at it. And most of them will go, yeah, I agree. I concur. These are the numbers I gave you. That's what I'm thinking. So it really works on both sides. It's either an eye opener if you're maybe out of control, or it's confirmation if you know what you're doing and things are working out right. And then, like everything else we do, the better the information in, the better out. Like you said, it always changes. And even in the best of circumstances, I call it a roadmap. That's what we put together for our clients. Here's a roadmap of how we see taxes, how we see your budget, how we see your expenses today. Where do you want to go? How old are you? How's longevity in your family? And then, here's the best plan I got today. Let's talk again next year and see how it goes. See if we need to make any little tweaks to this. So I appreciate you guys always keeping up the software. I can only imagine updating the tax rates and the provisional income and all the thresholds is a lot of fun. Did you get to do that part, Steve?
It really is fun, I have to tell you. We do. We try to get way out in front of all the news that's coming out. And, we have a lot of stuff going on now for 2022 tax-wise. And so before January 1st comes around in 22, we have it all built into the software. So we're all ready for that. But you do have to keep up with everything that's happening. And I got to tell you guys, in my whole life, and I'm a little older, this really, has been, the one time where everything's up in the air. So anything can happen, and it wouldn't surprise me. So one thing we will do is this, as things change, though, it will be built into the software to help you model, something that's, projections that are accurate with what we have to work with at this point.
Yeah, because, like I say, I keep harping on taxes because that's the one to me that's making the biggest change. I mean, if you think of the old adage, it made perfect sense. Put this money in your IRA now while you're making big money, then you're going to retire, you're going to be in a lower tax bracket, take it out. Makes perfect sense until you think, well, here's what I'm finding for my clients. A, they don't want that much less money when they retire. And B, tax rates, while they're low now, we certainly project them to go up dramatically. And that changes that whole equation on its ear. And your software illustrates that, beautifully. So we can say, I can't remember what you called it, but utopia, that's what you called it. Because I always say, here's what happens if nothing changes. Let's say we have a 50% increase in taxes. What does this do to your plan? And in some cases, it just decimates it. So why wouldn't you move those assets now while we can?
Yeah, and let me just say this, though, Jim. I think this is maybe a good way to put it. There's still a lot of people out there that want to pay off their house, so when they put their head on the pillow, they could feel like the house is paid off and they don't have a mortgage payment and things are, we're done. Everything's good. We own the whole place. If you think about it with a 401k, okay, if you don't convert or you don't make it a Roth or pay your taxes now, how are you supposed to take a $500,000 or $1 million 401k and put your head on the pillow when you don't even know how much of it is yours? So if you really wanted to pay the 401k off, just like you pay your house off, right, you pay the taxes now. Then you own the whole thing. And that's the same kind of thing, really. It just gives you a way to, feel like, hey, look, I got control of things and it's mine. And even if this happens, I'll be okay.
Well, I think that's a great way, because I used to ask similar like that. It's, you got $1 million. What do you have? They say I have $1 million. Well, no, maybe you've got $700,000 and a $300,000 tax bill. I don't know for sure, but it's not all yours. And it's misleading, because I know from numbers. I mean, if I'm thinking I'm sitting on $1 million, it feels different than if I think I'm sitting on 700,000, and 700,000 may be the reality. So, well, hey, Steve, thank you. I mean, that's been great. I know I've thrown a lot at you. Your answers have been great. I'm just asking one last question here. What haven't I asked you?
Well, let's talk about endgame, okay? Or actually,
Okay.
when change might happen. Now, we don't guarantee anything as financial advisors, right? But you know what? I feel comfortable guaranteeing one thing, though, and that's that change will take place. Okay, so you have your whole plan and you're feeling good, and all of a sudden tax policy changes, or all of a sudden the market's down 30%, or somebody might get sick and might not be here for as long as you think. What do you do? How do you choose a good financial advisor? You want to gravitate towards the advisor that keeps your plan updated. Okay, so if you have a plan and all of a sudden circumstances change, you make an appointment, you jump in there, you update the plan, and now you're back to where you should be, and you're updated after the certain circumstances might have happened or whatever. See, so you have to keep the plan on track. I just want to one last time say that there's so many moving parts in financial planning that we just have to do our best with what we have to work with today to give you an idea of where you're going to be. But again, as the years go by and things change, we change with you and we steer that ship, bringing it right into port at the end.
Steve, I want to thank you for coming on today. I can hear the enthusiasm in your voice. You make me feel excited, and you did a great job of describing what's much easier to look at. We have this software, and it has great printouts, and it's great, and I think you've done a great job for our listeners of kind of verbalizing how this would look. So I appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me.
Guys, this was fantastic. I learned a lot. Jim, I know that you use this software. If somebody's listening to this and they say, hey, I'd love to go through this process, should they just call you directly?
Absolutely. Give us a call at CRIS Financial. You can call us at 281-665-3081 or go to our website at chrisfinancial.com.
Fantastic. Again, this was Jim Donewald, and his guest was Steve Goldstein, one of the founders of Thomas Gold Solutions. Steve, thank you again for being on the show. Jim, of course, thank you for bringing him on the show for our audience to learn a ton. And our last thank you goes to you, the listening audience. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Well-Rounded Retirement Podcast with Jim Donewald and John Glowacz. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Jim and John come out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your friends and family. Again, thanks so much for listening today. For everyone at CRIS Financial, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Well-Rounded Retirement Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of CRIS Financial. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.